land. But as we see, the truth is very, very difficult to pass down from generation to generation as an unbroken telephone type of game. There was a story in the Second Temple where they found a Torah in the temple that didn't have one for many years. So we can't expect that all these tribes around the world would have been preserving the same exact version of Torah compliance. But if anyone looks at the Samaritans, they would clearly look like descendants of some type of Israelites who stayed in land, whether people who were brought in and converted or pureblood Israelites.
More or less, when was the Torah, the books of the Torah, written? In 2 minutes or less.
That's an excellent question, very tough one, and the truth is that we don't really know. There's a harsh debate about this question.
From what time to what time about?
So basically, the three main options are the watershed is the exile to Babylon,
Which was in
586 BCE. So the debate is whether it happened before the exile, in the monarchic period, that is, or during the exilic period, or possibly afterwards.
Yeah.
And every scholar you ask would give you a different answer. But in either case, I would say that whenever we place the writing of the Pentateuch or the Pentateuchal sources, the traditions that they preserve stem from probably oral teachings and oral traditions, national epics, and myths that were shared by the Judean community and Hebrew speakers throughout antiquity. So I think that the question is really not so much
the original question, because the original question is about when it was written, plus, this is the next part, since then, has the text of the Torah changed from then until now?
Yes. So this is quite a different question, really. So just to summarize the perhaps not very satisfying answer for the previous one. So what we have in the Pentateuch, in the Torah, is a compilation of traditions that were in circulation in antiquity and eventually committed to writing, probably or perhaps at different periods before they crystallized into what we know as the Torah. And later on, the text did continue to change. We know that because we have several different versions of the Pentateuch.
From when?
From different periods. The texts that we have go back to the Second Temple period, the Greco-Roman period, the Hellenistic period, but they must represent older traditions. We just don't have the manuscripts, but obviously we have that. For instance, just one example, but a very prominent one, there is the Jewish Torah, and there is the Samaritan Torah. The Samaritans have their own tradition of the Torah, which differs in many respects from the Jewish one. So obviously the text has changed.
So when did the Jewish text, when was it codified? Or frozen?
So we know, well, clear-cut evidence exists from the 2nd century CE onwards.
Okay.
But again, this is only the manuscript evidence.
Meaning if you took a text from that's found, let's say the Dead Sea,
Exactly.
from then, and compared to today, it's the exact same text?
Yes.
Okay.
And we have scrolls from Qumran, for instance, which are a bit older than that, let's say from the 1st century BCE, which are very, very similar to the Jewish text as we know it as the Masoretic text. Not identical, but very, very close. So it must have preceded the 2nd century as well. But beyond that, we simply don't have manuscript evidence.
So since 200 AD, ECE, there's no evidence that anything has changed in the text that we, the Jews, call the Torah today.
Right. I mean, we have a gap in the evidence, but basically...
What is that gap, by the way?
The gap, I mean, that we don't have, we don't really have manuscripts from, let's say, the 3rd century, the 6th century, or